Then
Very good.
So, Madam Chair, shall I admit the members of the public?
yes.
Great.
Okay, welcome. So
Hello.
welcome. It's about 5:35. And I'm calling the September 6, 2022 meeting of the Historic Site Preservation Board to order. May we please have the roll call?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Member Miller? Member Hanson?
Here.
Member Rosenau?
Here.
Vice Chair Nelson?
Present.
Chair Huff?
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. May we please have the staff report on the posting of the agenda?
Yes, the agenda for this meeting was posted for public review at the City Hall Bulletin Board on the west side of Council Chambers by 9 p.m. on Monday, August 29th, as required by established policies and procedures.
Very good. Does the board have any revisions to the agenda? Okay, may I please have a motion to approve the agenda? Motion, please.
I'll move.
Okay, so we have a motion by Eric Rosenau and a second by Jade Nelson. Is there any discussion about the agenda? Seeing none, I call for the question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? Okay, so the motion passes 5-2-0. Very good. So at this time, we'd like to acknowledge and thank two former board members for their dedicated work while serving on the Historic Site Preservation Board. And those two wonderful members are Dan Kaiser and Stephen Rose. And I see Dan Kaiser's very friendly, dignified face on Zoom.
As usual.
And Dan served on the board for how many years, Dan? I lost track.
6 years.
6 years.
It's been an amazing 6 years. I took over the spot that James Williamson had on the board at that time. And I did it because Jeff convinced me to do it, because Olaus Palmas wanted representation, needed representation. It's been a wild ride, and after 6 years, the city has moved on, and I am also ready to move on. I am president of the Olaus Palmas Neighborhood Organization Board again, and I am now consultant to the O'Donnell Club Board and doing a few other things around town. So it's been a grand ride, and I will, and the museum, you know, Ray is one of the lead docents, and that sucks us in too. So we're always involved with the community, but you will always be my friends. And if, you know, I can't even begin to tell you how different the organization is and what we were dealing with when we first started versus what happens now. So I think it's good. I think it's moving in a right direction. Catherine, you're the best. Jade, you're the best. Ken, you've done it all, you know, took it from being Roxanne Ploss to where it is today. I don't mean to disparage her, but it was just a different world at that time. And in Olaus Palmas, that's when Jackie Autry held sway, you know, and it's an entirely different world now. And it's good to have been through it and to have seen it. And you'll always be my friends. And thank you for this opportunity. And now I'm going to leave.
Well, not yet.
Dan, I also want to say from a staff level how much we do appreciate your service to the board and to the symposium, the organization of the tours and so on. So a heartfelt thank you from staff as well.
Well, that's sweet, Ken. You know, I wasn't always sweet. That's not my personality. Being a New York boy, you just aren't. You know, you push and you do what you can, and you push back when you can't. So I just hope the board keeps moving in that direction.
Well, thank you, Dan, and I'll call on you for some advice because you are a wonderful, dedicated member that always did your homework and contributed wonderful comments and questions to the board. And of course, helping with the organization of the symposium with the tours greatly enhanced that program so tremendously. So I thank you, Dan, and we'll be seeing you around town quite a bit.
You will, and if you want to talk about tours, there's other information from Modernism Week, which I won't share with you right now because that's a separate thing. And I'm not really involved with Modernism Week, but it's the same thing. I'm being tapped for this, tapped for that, because I've done this for so long. I mean, in New York, 6 years is not long. It takes a lifetime. In Palm Springs, 6 years is a lifetime. So, all right, that's all.
So we thank you so very much, Dan. So we'll be seeing you a lot.
Okay.
And I don't think Stephen Rose signed
I
up.
am. I'm
Oh,
on.
where are you,
I think
Stephen?
He's there as a phone number.
I'm on the
310.
phone.
Well, you're on the phone. So speaking of New York, so you've moved to New York, I hear.
I am. And I am in the Rockefeller Apartments on the 10th floor, looking into the sculpture garden at MoMA as we speak.
Life
Oh
is
my
rough.
goodness. Well, we thank you, Stephen, for your dedication and your participation. You are always very thoughtful about every project that you reviewed and commented about and got us really thinking and stimulating a lot of conversation. And we really appreciate your participation. And we will miss you, but you will come visit, won't you?
Yes, I'm actually going to be keeping my house through modernism of this coming year, but you know, I'm just not there enough. I'm only going to be there 3 or 4 months, maybe out of the year, and I feel like, you know, the board members should, you know, attend all the tours of the houses we're considering and everything. And I don't want to be a person who's phoning it in. So anyway, I've loved it. I think you guys are awesome. Of all the things I've ever been involved in, I think you guys really do the work and you do it beautifully and you're thoughtful. Catherine, you're amazing. And Ken, you are one of the greats of all time. I mean, I think your sincerity, your concern, your true passion for what you do is just unmatched.
Well, I can't do what I do without doing what you guys do. And again, as I said to Dan, at a staff level, we have very much appreciated your contributions to this board as well, Stephen. So thank you very much.
Well, we kicked it around a little bit, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Good.
Thank you, guys. And I will see you around the playground.
Okay. We'll see ya,
Be
Stephen.
well, all of you.
And Dan, thank you so much.
Hey, Catherine, I'm signing off. We'll talk.
Okay.
later.
You
Okay.
too. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
And Madam Chair, I also wanted to take an opportunity to, again, just formally introduce our new planning director, Christopher Hadwin. Christopher, do you want to give a little background on yourself?
Sure. Well, it's interesting. I actually just moved here from New York, but I'm very pleased to be here. So I was the Staten Island Borough Director for the New York City Department of City Planning for the last 5 years. Before that, I was doing planning in Canada. I was also doing land use and Aboriginal land claim negotiations for the Government of Ontario. So I have a little bit of experience with some of those issues that we deal with here in Palm Springs. But I'm very excited to be here. You know, big move, but and a hot time to be relocating here, but there's so much really excellent planning work here. And I really appreciate the service of all of you on the board and the work that you do. And I'm really looking forward to working together, you know, to make Palm Springs to keep Palm Springs the wonderful place that it is. So happy to be here and look forward to working with all of you.
Good. Thank you. And on behalf of our board, we extend you a very warm welcome and look forward to getting to know you. So thank you so much for moving to Palm Springs in the summer. My goodness, you get an award to start with. So, okay, next is the public comment. And this is time that's set aside for members of the public to address the Historic Site Preservation Board on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. And although the Historic Site Preservation Board values all of your comments, pursuant to the Brown Act, it generally cannot take any action on items not listed on the agenda. So we have about 3 minutes assigned for each speaker. Testimony for public hearings are taken later at the time of those such hearings. So staff, has anyone requested to comment on a non-public item or item that's not on the agenda?
No, Madam Chair, we have not received any requests to speak. I see we have some guests here in the call with us. If there's anybody here in the call who is wishing to speak during public comment, in other words, a general matter of material dealing with the HSPB, please unmute yourself now. And if you can turn your camera on and we can see you and let you have your moment to speak, you will have 3 minutes. Anybody here wishing to speak? Looks like not. Okay, Madam Chair, there are no speakers for public comment.
Okay, so seeing no speakers, we will proceed to the consent agenda, which is the approval of the minutes. Are there any revisions to the minutes of the meeting of July 5th, 2022? Member Hanson?
Just a couple small things. Under item 3A, the third paragraph, my last name is spelled with an O and not an E.
Thank you.
And then on the same page at the bottom where it says Member Hanson, also spelled wrong, opined that the statuary doesn't need to be found to be historic. I think I believe I said to be individually historically significant.
Individually historically
Yes.
significant? Okay,
And that was all from me.
Mhm.
thank
Okay.
you.
Yes. Any other corrections to the minutes? May I have a motion to approve the minutes of July 5th with those corrections that were just named? Motion, please.
Motion to approve.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay.
I second.
Okay. So so the motion was made by Mr. Miller and seconded by Member Hanson. Is there any further discussion about the minutes? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so any opposed? Okay, vote passes 5-0. Okay, next we move on the agenda. There are no public hearings today. So let us proceed to agenda item 3A, which is unfinished business. This is the application by the Villa Roma Homeowners Association for his historic district designation of the Villa Roma Garden Homes located at 2500 South Sierra Madre. May we please have a staff report?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. As noted in your staff report at the June 7th meeting, the HSPB considered this application at a public hearing. Staff had advised at that time that we were unable to make the criteria findings necessary to make a recommendation. However, the board did find that the application did meet the criterion C and F. And so we brought back to you in July a draft resolution reflecting that. However, I did not capture it correctly. And so I solicited Member Hanson's help, and she did the major lifting on this current draft resolution for your consideration. And then just under the conditions on this particular resolution, as we did note, Prior to this going to the city council, I'll work with the applicant to develop their design guidelines, and then the regular conditions, of course, apply.
Good. Does the board have any questions for Mr. Lyon? Any further questions? Member Nelson?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make an observation that in the July meeting, I had asked for consideration of those light fixtures which do remain at Villa Roma that have been identified as original, be listed as contributing features and or character defining, whichever category is more appropriate. And so on page 3 of 6 of the current staff report or memorandum, I don't see under that listing of section 2 any of the light fixtures, nor do I see it in section 3. So if we could add those original light fixtures which do remain in the appropriate category, I believe that's something that was talked about at length over 2 different meetings.
Yes, it appears that I did not pick that up. It's a little awkward for us here, but let's do this as an informal vote. If the board concurs with the adding of the original light fixtures that can be identified as such being added to the character defined features, would you please, Madam Chair, take a vote on that for us by roll call, and we will get this taken care of.
So those agree with the original light fixtures, say aye.
Aye.
Okay,
All right,
so we all, the 5 of us agree on that
Very good.
point.
thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. I do remember that,
Yeah.
Vice Chair Nelson. So are there any other questions or comments at this time? Any others? Okay. Vice Chair Nelson?
Yeah, just a quick comment to thank Staff Member Lyon for all his patience with this and for working with Member Hanson and the board to come to a mutual understanding and resolution that I think we can all be proud of.
Very welcome.
Yes, yes, and I would like to join with that comment that you guys worked really hard to clarify all the issues that were kind of confusing, all the layers, all the discussions. We all worked very hard, and we thank you, all members of our board, and Ken, and especially Janet Hanson, in getting those issues refined and clarified so that we all could agree. And so thank you very much. So, may I have, seeing no further comments, may I have a motion, please? Okay, so I have a motion by Member Hanson. Is there a second? Okay, Member Hanson has made the motion. Vice Chair Nelson has seconded the motion. Are there any further discussions
And just
about?
to clarify, this motion is accepting the draft resolution in your packet today that is recognizing your findings on the Villa Roma Historic District application.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lyon, for restating that motion. So, any discussions about the motion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Any abstention? I believe that's.
Yeah, I abstain.
Yeah, okay. So we have the motion approved 4-0 with 1 abstention. So that's passed. Thank goodness, and thanks to all, and to our members of the Villa. Thank you for your dedicated work on your project too. We appreciate that so very much.
And just for the board's understanding, I don't have this agendized yet for the city council. It will be dependent on our ability to get the design guidelines put together prior to their meeting. But as soon as we do have those dates affirmed, I'll be communicating that to you.
Thank you. So let us proceed to new business, agenda item 4A. Robin and Hilton Howell, who are owners, requesting approval of a certificate of appropriateness for alterations to Invernada, a Class 1 historic site located at 657 North Via Mara List. May we please have the staff report?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, seldom do we have a certificate of appropriateness staff report that is unfortunately as lengthy as this one became, but this is no simple certificate of appropriateness. This is a rather extraordinary restoration of an equally extraordinary house within the collection of historic properties here in Palm Springs. So Mr. and Mrs. Mr. and Mrs. Howell did take possession of the house this year. The house had been known previously for several decades and was very well lived in at the time that the Howells bought the property. They've worked with architect John Walsh and Bennett, the landscape architect, to put together a fairly comprehensive rehabilitation with some adaptive reuse at Invernada. And as you know, Villa Invernada, very briefly, was built in 1931. It's credited to the architecture of William Charles Tanner, or the architectural designer. George Hiho was the original owner, who was a person of significance as a significant industrialist out of the Detroit area. And the second owners, the Lewises, in particular, Myrtle or Tilly Lewis, her claim to fame was the creation of the Roma tomato, right? I think is what it was. So we have in your packet a couple of pieces of information that articulate what this project is about. And you will have found you have a historic landscape survey that looks like this, and you have a 11 by 17 set that looks like this. And then I believe you also have in your packet a very interesting forensic study, for lack of a better word, of the roofing on this building. So let's go into this quickly. I don't want to run through the whole thing, but I want to pick up some highlights. As I've mentioned in the staff report, this is one of the very earliest, well, it's actually the earliest application that I processed back when I first came to the city. And at that time, we were much less articulate in defining the important characteristics and other factors. And so in your staff report on page 4 and 5 are what we have identified as the character defining features of this property. In the accompanying, I just want to make a footnote of this, in the accompanying landscape report authored by Steve Kalon, Steve asserts that there are two periods of significance for the home. That period between the wars, when Mr. Hiho originally had the home constructed, and then the second period from 1946 onward, when the Lewises owned the home. Staff does not take that stand. We believe there is one period of significance for this home, and it is the period between the wars. And this house stands as an extraordinary example of the large villas that were being built during the Depression and the early sort of the golden period of Palm Springs growth in the 1930s, when many industrialists and people from Hollywood were coming out and building these very large estates as their second homes and their winter homes and so on. The analysis on the whole property and the whole project begins on page 7 of your staff report. And the applicant and the architect have broken this down into 6 parts. And I'm just going to mention them for the audience. The pool house is work toward that, which is adding an addition, taking off an addition, adding a covered porch. The service courtyard, which is being converted, and this is the part which is an adaptive reuse of part of this house, is being converted to an outdoor family room. The upper level guest suite is being expanded. And just a footnote on that is that the zoning code does allow small increases in these second-story areas in the R1 zone. As most of you know, the R1 zone now prohibits two-story dwellings, but many of the older ones, as this one was, had their second stories added or built originally, and so they have been allowed to continue. And the zoning code allows for modest increases in 50% enlargement of the square footage, and that's what's being proposed here to really make that second floor more functional as a guest unit. And it also takes care of a lot of very difficult and problematic conditions there, including some not so sympathetic roofs and mechanical equipment, and there's deterioration on the waterproofing of the decking and so on. I believe 3 of you have actually made the site visit to the home prior to tonight's meeting, and I think all of you probably have some familiarity with it. The 4th portion was the hardscape redesign and the restoration. This includes the pool, the spa, the driveway, and some new patio spaces being added to the south side of the home. And then the 5th part would be the landscaping, and I'll talk briefly about that. It's broken down into a series of zones in terms of the way that we've now analyzed it and interpreted it against our findings. And then lastly, there are a series of much needed maintenance and deferred items that are being taken care of, including re-roofing, replumbing, new electric, new HVAC, replacement, deteriorated stucco. There's some drainage problems on the site that are being ameliorated. The perimeter garden wall, new trash enclosures. The home is really getting its second life breathed into it with this project. On page 10 of your staff report is where we go into the analysis of each of these components. And I put it in a table, which I don't normally do, but because there's such a broad extent to the scope of this project, I thought it would be the easiest way for you to churn through it. And in general, I have found in looking at the project that almost all parts of it, in my opinion, do meet the findings necessary for the granting of a certificate of appropriateness. The one item that I take exception to is on page 11 of your staff report, and that is replacing the aluminum glazing that's on the west facade. As you can see from the earlier photos in your staff report, that original veranda was open, as is typical of the case for these Spanish colonial revival homes. And sometime in the past, that was enclosed. And in my opinion, as the city's historic preservation officer, that did diminish the integrity and the historicity of the home. And so although the applicant does desire to replace that set of veranda glazing with glazing that is more in keeping with the architecture and the style of the home, I would assert that that is a situation that really is not part of the original character of the home, and I'm not recommending it to be approved, but rather that the veranda be restored to its original open condition. The rest of the items are on the top of on page 12, I should say. And the 2 things that I will bring here that are relatively minor on this page is some discussion about the landscaping in the courtyard, which I'll speak to in a moment. And there were some landscape questions on the outside perimeter of the property that were in the roadway right of way, and engineering does not allow large trees and things to be planted in the roadway right of way. And so those aspects have been revised. The findings as you go through them, of course, do make affirmative findings. That the project, as you've seen it here, does meet the standards, that the work is being done consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards, and that the many of the character defining features that have become deteriorated or have become degraded over time, the project is really doing a remarkable job of bringing them back to life. So our recommendation is for approval of the certificate of appropriateness. To the back of your staff report after the vicinity map, I have placed a set of conditions of approval that I'm recommending that you adopt, particularly where we have areas that are being modified. And I've noted this in number 2, providing photographic records for our archives here at the city of how it does exist. There's some work involving replacement and rebuilding of the steps to the second floor. The very first riser has some of the original ceramic tile on it, and I'm recommending that the tile for the remaining steps that are being rebuilt, if the owner can, to find a tile that is as close as possible in the design of it and put those risers back into a tile material. The reinstallation of the roof tile in the same random matter, the same color gradation. I'll get back to that in just a minute. Rebuilding of the pool. As I mentioned to you a few weeks ago, this pool, which was original in 1947, was demolished. It was demolished without permits and without approvals. The owner has been notified and the pool contractor has been notified. I plan on meeting with the pool contractor next week, I believe is what our meeting time is. The city will be handling this pool problem at an administrative level. Mr. Howell and I have had conversations about this, and the pool contractor assures me that he has the ability to find the ceramic tile open gutter components that this pool had, through most of the last several decades that it's been there. So it's an unfortunate situation. The owner has been very apologetic and they have been very amenable working with the city. But I just want to make the board aware that we will take care of that problem at an administrative level with the applicant. In terms of the concrete, I've recommended, and I think John and can speak a little bit to the finish on the concrete, but I'm recommending that this concrete be made in a way that is patterned after the concrete that was done at the Willows, which is almost replicating. You can't really tell that it's not concrete from the 1930s. The number 7, from the report on the landscape, there was a recommendation that the area around the house, between the drive and the house, be restored to something as nearly as possible of the natural desert landscape, keeping it minimal, simple, and with indigenous plantings that you would have seen at that time. There's some paint swatches that have been applied on the outside of the perimeter garden wall that we're recommending to be removed. All work to conform to the Secretary of the Interior standards as they do the water and gas piping, that there be no surface mounted piping, and that in the original design of the concrete, there was gaps, and I have recommended that those gaps be closed. I want to talk a minute about the landscape. This property has almost 2 acres, and there are a number of different components or panels to the landscape design, both in terms of what was there in 1931 and what happened subsequent. So the initial landscape, as you saw in the Kalon report, was primarily that courtyard that's on the west side of the home. And then as the Lewises bought the home, they added the pool house, and the landscaping was continued. In doing so, part of the demising wall or the garden wall that demarcated the western edge of the courtyard was removed, so that the pool and the pool house became a more integrated part of that outdoor courtyard area. The work that's being proposed in the service courtyard is not unlike that which was done there. There's going to be a portion of the wall between the service courtyard and the main courtyard, which will be removed to facilitate a more contemporary use of that space. This is going to be a family home, and that kind of outdoor space where there can be gathering around sort of a cantina kind of a space is important to this particular owner, and they've done so in a way, in my opinion, that is sensitive to the architecture of the building and of the architecture of the home. This is one of those areas, though, however, where I do want to stress that we want to collect, photographs of its existing conditions so that we can add them to the archival file, so there is a record of how this thing was originally. So now let's look at the landscape more clearly. When you look at the courtyard had the original fountain, which is still there, and then a large green panel of grass to the south. The current scheme is proposing a very formal cactus garden and succulent garden. This is not necessarily consistent with the original historic character of this home. This home, like many in Palm Springs, has been designed in a very casual, almost vernacular style. It's a simple Spanish colonial revival as opposed to the more formal style that you might see in cities like Madrid or Barcelona. And so I have some questions and concerns about the fact that this is kind of an out of place proposal, this cactus garden. But I've looked at it this way. As we've seen different projects come through the city, we try to accommodate the needs and the changes in use of the current applicants that are making these proposals. In this particular case, this landscape, should there be another person in the future, a family in the future that bought the home and wishes to do a more articulate or accurate restoration, this landscape could be removed and the simple panel of turf and the meandering flagstone pathway could be reinstated. So for that reason, I'm comfortable allowing that to go forward as part of my recommendation. The perimeter areas of the property more toward the east side of the driveway, most of those throughout the course of time that this house has existed has been fairly undeveloped. It's pretty much literally original desert with a few plantings and some hedges. The Howells are coming from Atlanta, and they are fascinated by the incredible horticulture that we have here in the desert. And Bennett has put together an amazing palette and design to almost, I think I would hazard to say, is a bit of a miniature botanic garden that I think you could have nameplates on things to really show the wide variety of plant types that are possible to grow here. So I've said from a historic point of view, let that area be something that gets modified to the current owner's taste. It again is something that could be removed in the future, turned back to something that's more natural, but I feel comfortable with that kind of change happening on the outer side. The same thing is happening on the south side of the home and toward the west side. A lot of the existing screening and oleanders and trees and cypress and other things are either at the end of their useful life, or they have become diseased and blighted or damaged over time, or they've suffered from improper pruning. And so Bennett has really put together a very careful landscape palette that reflects, as you can see in the photos in the staff report and in the landscape report, a landscape design that really works to bring back some of that feeling that existed in the 1940s when the Lewises had the home, and keeping some of the alignment of trees and other things, the palm trees that you see there, respectful of that particular period. So we're recommending approval of those things. That concludes my staff report. I'm available to answer any questions. As you can see here, we have both Robin and Hilton Howell here, and John Walsh and Bennett, who will be able to speak to any questions you have on landscape and architecture. So that concludes my staff report, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Does the board have any questions for Mr. Lyon at this point? Any questions? Vice Chair Nelson?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment and a question. Firstly, just want to emphasize how wonderful and important the site visit was. Having been there before on my own, it's completely different going there with staff and their trained eye, and also with the architect, because it opened up things that you would not have noticed or seen otherwise. So that was extremely crucial for me personally. So thank you for that. And likewise, thank you to staff for including my one big observation that day about the original tile at the bottom of the stairs, and incorporating that, even though it was mentioned that it was going to be demoed and rebuilt. So that was wonderful to see. And then a question about the roof. So in Exhibit A, item number 4, staff is recommending to reinstall the roof tile in the same random manner and color gradation. But then in the attached document from the architect, it gives the whole roofing contractor's inspection report. And he is recommending removing all of the roof and disposing of it and having it be recycled. And then replacing it entirely with reproduced Gliding McBean roof tile for the entire property. So that makes sense to me, but I concur with staff that you would want to protect and reuse whatever roof tiles available. But my question being, is there enough of that roof tile to be able to cover all the areas they want to do?
Well, you've raised the one point that I completely forgot to mention in my staff report. So thank you for bringing this up. That note in the staff report was written before I had seen the roofing forensic study. And I was very surprised, as maybe some of you were as well, that incredible roof with that graded color is not original. And I was particularly impressed with the roofing consultant's investigative dig, where he went right down and found the original 15-pound felts, which of course we're doing 40-pound and double 40-pound felts today. And that he found these original handmade, I'm sorry, not handmade tiles, but his assertion was that this roof had originally handmade tiles that they literally would make in the field, bend that tile over their knee, lay it at the side to dry out. But those roof tiles apparently were very fragile, did not hold up well. And that kind of gives us the history and the sleuthing behind why this is not the original roof, but probably one that was installed in the 1950s. Fascinating to me that he was able to dig this thing up and turn it over and see the Gliding Bean stamp and the clay tile and really begin to kind of piece this piece of the puzzle together. So the clarification that I would offer you, Member Nelson, is that the owner, when you look at the tile, if you remember being up at the second floor level, that entire roof is cemented together. And normally we see a little bit of cement where we have a boosted tile and so on. That whole thing is cemented together. And the likelihood of them restoring or salvaging even half of the roof tile is likely not, it's going to be a futile effort. And so the architect and the roofing consultant have recommended that we allow that existing roof to be removed and disposed of, and that a new roof be put on with new tile matching the same color gradation as well as the same rustic informal pattern of tile arrangement.
So just to clarify, staff is now in agreement with the latest finding by the roofing contractor that the entire roof be replaced with reproduction Gliding McBean.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Lyon? And any other questions from the board? Okay, I'd like to, our applicants are present, and I would like to invite Robin and Hilton Howell to say a few words about the project, anything that you'd like to share more about the project for the board's consideration. I welcome you and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chairman Huff, Vice Chairman Nelson, members of the board. Thank you for your time this evening. My name is Hilton Howell. My wife is down in another Zoom feed down there. Her name is Robin. And so Robin, you say anything you want to whenever you're ready to. First, I want to begin not only by saying thank you for your attendance tonight, but I want to say thank you in front of this board to Ken Lyon, who has been a remarkable asset to all of us. I think that I'm very lucky, and my wife is very lucky, that we have assembled a strong, sterling group of local Palm Springs-based professionals who have helped us to navigate this process. I will tell you, sometimes you jump into the deep end of the pool, literally. And I kind of think I've managed to pull that off on this one. By way of background, though, both my wife and I have a true love for old homes. here in Atlanta, Georgia. Our first home was built in 1928. And when we were in our early 30s, we renovated it completely to historical standards, and then also made it a home that was sufficient to house at least 2 of our eventual 4 children. And then after that, we bought our current home, which was completed the same year as Invernada, here on Tuxedo Road. And sadly, in the 21st century, all you have to do is Google my name and it'll show up online. But we renovated that building that home in 1996 through 1997, finally moving in 1998. And we have continued to bring it up to what I think is historical standards, but also modern day standards, so that one day when we're no longer here and it goes to a subsequent owner, it can last another 100 years. That, candidly, is what our efforts are with Invernada. I will tell you, Willis Watts, who is on this call, called me from Palm Springs about this house. And it was a late afternoon on Friday before Easter weekend. Actually, it was Good Friday. And he said, I found this home for you guys. I go, I'm not looking for a home. Actually, I kind of was. I wanted something during the winter months when it's cold and wet in Georgia. And but it was a bad day on a Friday, and he talked me into doing a video, something very akin to this, walkthrough of Invernada. And I said, well, let me check with Robin and see what she thinks. And surprise, this was during COVID, both she and my eldest daughter said, well, absolutely. Well, little did I know, we did that at 1 something in the afternoon, Eastern time. And by the next morning at 9 a.m. Eastern, we were on a plane coming to Palm Springs. By the next Sunday, we had the house under contract. What I'm describing to you is nothing short of love at first sight with regard to this home. I'm sorry for the length and the depth of the presentation that you have before it. I personally read through it at least 4 times, and every time I learned something new. And I can assure you now that I have read at least half the biography of Tilly Lewis, and I've read her menu plan, tasting diet menu plan. Plus, I've had the honor of meeting Tracy Conrad, who gave me her book with regard to, I think it's Einstein. I looked for it, but I couldn't remember the name of the title, but Einstein Slept Here or something akin to it. I located it, John and Bennett, I got it. And, but I had read through a bunch of that. And then I had read a book that your organization had published that had this house in Invernada as an unattributed architectural house. I am without doubt certain that Tanner was the architect of this house. And we have seen several other homes in Palm Springs. I think one was in Las Palmas, I'm sorry. And that had been better preserved over the decades than Invernada had been. I don't want to take too much of your time because I really would like both John and Bennett to speak about their plans architecturally and answer your questions and about the architecture. But when Robin and I jumped into the deep end of the pool, we really didn't know what we were getting into. But we knew it was going to be a big project. And once again, throughout that whole time, which began during COVID and then during his convalescence, Ken Lyon helped all of us to do the best that we could do to bring this to, I hope to be, a positive vote tonight. And then soon to be, because I see Robert Van Tassel, who is on this line, who is our builder, so that he can start working soon, because we've owned it for a minute. And during that, and this will come up to one of my requests that will be coming to you from me orally, but during the course of our ownership during this past summer, we have had multiple break-ins, and we had one individual that actually moved into a portion of the house And earlier today, I was able to share that directly with Ken Lyon. But that will lead to one of the requests that I would at least put to the board for their consideration. But I will tell you before I turn it over to them, I think candidly that what has been put together for your consideration accomplishes everything that anyone could hope to accomplish. It has truly respected the history and the dynamic lives of the people that have owned this property prior to Robin and to me. It has preserved the best of the style of the architecture, not just of its architect, but of a period of time before what Palm Springs is famous for, its mid-century architecture, back when Spanish Revival architecture was all the rage. And it's done something which is critical for me and my family, because we want it to be a home for us, a home for our family, hopefully one day a home for our grandchildren, but also a home that we can entertain graciously in Palm Springs, because we intend on making this city a primary residence of our family. And I look forward to meeting all of you in person, not just on this Zoom call. You live in a wonderful part of the planet Earth. And I'm thrilled that Willis talked me into it. And I'm thrilled even more that I jumped off the deep end of the pool. Now, let me address the pool before I turn it over to John and to Bennett. We didn't know when we jumped into that figurative pool that the literal pool had not been filled in probably 30 years. All right. What we did know was that the prior owner, who is a brilliant doctor in the community and had lived there since he bought it from the Tilly Lewis estate, almost 50 years, 40 something in any event. But he was a doctor first and foremost. He lived in 2 rooms. Most of the rest of the rooms were filled with things that I never saw because the real estate agents moved them out. And I found out subsequently that the pool had not been kept full for an extended period of time. One of the great concerns that we had with regard to the pool was whether or not it would hold water at all. The real estate agent, in the process of putting it on the market, made it look very beautiful, as he did the interior of the house. That is their job. It was not, and I'm sure many of you may have seen it previous to that, it was not that home back beforehand. And there was deep and profound concern that the entirety of the pool could not be rehabilitated, that it had to be taken out of the ground and completely rebuilt to hold the water, especially in a terrain in the desert as demanding as Palm Springs is. I'm happy to report, as I did to Ken Lyon, that the core samples, which is what we authorized, demonstrated that the pool, thankfully, is sound, but it needs to be completely redone. As part of that, we agreed with Mr. Lyon that we would keep the antiquated but very attractive pool gutter system, because that's what was there. Beautiful system, but it's an old system and it's not efficient. It collects dirt, debris. There's better ways to do things. But we also agreed to keep the unique, non-Spanish, but the unique, what I call Palm Springs blue tile around the exterior of that pool. And so when it is said and done, the pool will look exactly the way it looked in its heyday back in the 40s. I'm going to say one last thing before I turn it over to John and Bennett. Ken Lyon is precisely correct with regard to the history and the architecture of what we refer to as the loggia. The loggia today is unattractive and disconcerting, but it provides a level of security for the home that, if we removed it, would expose our home to, I believe, an unnecessary degree of risk. One of the things that saved actually our home from being taken over this previous summer was the fact that it was secured by those glass panes. I mentioned, and I don't want to name drop, but she has been very helpful in a very short period of time. When I met with Tracy Conrad, she looked at the loges, and while she agreed that that was not the way it was in 31, it was the way it was in 47. Because if you look on page 14 of your, not the staff report, but the subsequent pages, the bottom photograph shows the pool house and the landscaping that was completed when Tilly Lewis purchased it from the Hio estate. And you can tell the difference because in 47, you see the glass there. If you go to the next page on page 15, you can see the exterior of the property photographed before the pool was put in that shows the exposed, non-enclosed loggia. And you can tell the difference between the photographs. It is also worth noting, and I know there's no one more cognizant of this than those that live in the desert, but in 1931, we didn't have air conditioning. And but for that invention, the American South would have never grown from anything. But by the end of the Second War, we did. And so the Lewises enclosed the loggia and then implemented air conditioning in that area and then throughout the rest of the home. Because previous to that, everything was open air from 31 through 47. When they bought it, there was no air conditioning, there was no central air. There's a complete central air system in the entirety of the home. And the security shutters that are currently there provide a level of security that if we went back to the old steel and glass sash doors, which I really want to keep because they have spent close to 100 years with the patina of age that is simply not replicable today. They have a patina of age that is wonderful, but I will never be able to make them a secure barrier to those who might want to break into the property. And I'm very cognizant of that. With that being said, and I want you guys to know, you're probably bored already with me, but I'll be on this thing as long as you want to ask me any questions about anything. But I'd now like to turn it over to our architect and to our landscape architect, who've done, I think, one of the most considerate, brilliant, creative, and exciting redevelopments of a home that I've ever seen. I could not have dreamed when we jumped into the deep end of the pool that I would find two individuals who have been such sterling advocates for this house and for its style, and what they have done is going to make it, if you all approve, a home for my family, but also a home that will last in Palm Springs for at least another century. So, Dawn, if that's okay with you, Madam Chairman.
Yes, absolutely. We welcome.
Thank you, Hilton. Madam Chairman, board members, my name is John Walsh, architect in Palm Springs, and it's been a pleasure and an interesting process to work on in Vernada over the past year or so. And in the brochure that you have, and certainly in Ken's staff report, the components of the architectural improvements are called out and articulated there. And so I'm available to certainly answer questions. What I'd like to touch on are a few overarching design efforts and values as we approach the project. The first that I would want to mention is that it's been an act of rehabilitation, and I'm sure I don't have to mention to all of you who have been involved in rehabilitating properties. It's an effortful evaluation of existing conditions. These things oftentimes have a tendency to fall apart in your hands, literally. And Ken is quite right. The investigative process regarding the roof was better than a classroom education. And to see the impact of materials fully using their full lifespan, in addition to enduring decades of just general natural decay, makes you aware that you have to be pretty responsible in how you put this back together. The next thing I would want to mention is that effort has gone into trying to create a seamless architecture to landscape architecture relationship. Toward that end, Bennett Pudaba and I have worked hand in glove. We've sort of started from the initial programming process with our client in terms of how these spaces are going to be used to their best and fullest capability, as well as issues of site analysis, view corridors, drainage issues, slope. A lot of these basic physical phenomena don't seem to have been necessarily factored in on the original house. And this is our opportunity to kind of reach deeper and fix a few things. The last thing that I would mention is that, the design concepts only address, not only address the unique historical importance reflective of a certain time and a certain place in Palm Springs, but additionally, the burden here is to create a comfortable family home. And in my mind, it will adequately be declared a success when it not only hits the target of preserving and restoring a unique property, but further when it's being fully used and enjoyed and filled with people. The design program's goal is not to create a museum, but rather a comfortable historic home for this family to live in. So enough said from the architectural standpoint. I'm gonna share my cube here with Bennett.
It's like the Brady Bunch. Hi, my name is Bennett Peterbaugh, and I have resided in Palm Springs in the desert since 1982. My company designs and installs the projects we design, and we even have a maintenance division that keeps the projects looking the way we design it in the first place. So with all those years of experience, I think we've come up with a wonderful palette with the help of the Howells and their interest and love for unique varieties of plants. Has been part of our narrative for this rehabilitation and in bringing these gardens back up to what they should be. We've spent a lot of time on site observing what was there and as it exists, what it was there in the past, studying Stephen Kalon's report on from photographs and literature, how Invernada started from the beginning in 1931 through its progression with Tilly Lewis and the changes that were made in each period. The other directives we have followed have taken into account are the historical site preservation boards being respectful of that, and also assessing all the existing site conditions was a big part of our process in the new design of the project and landscape. And last but not least, which is why we have a few of the changes in the gardens that I'm proposing, is we have satisfied, I've been very cognizant of the water use that we are having to follow here in the desert through the city planning's narrative and the Desert Water Agency's guidelines. And we have met so far those guidelines as I have designed the gardens to accommodate that. That meant removing portions of lawn that required a lot of water, a lot of maintenance. And then that was also a reason I took the direction with the cactus garden that is in the on the west side of the guest bedroom courtyard there. So that was a big reason that we have to be conscious, and you can see what's happening in Southern California with all of these bans on water usage. And I want to let you know that we've been very straightforward in keeping those guidelines intact with our design. That's really about all I have to say. If you have any questions regarding that, we're more than open to hear that. And I appreciate and thank you for this evening and hearing our presentation.
Very good. Thank you very much. Mr. Lyon.
Madam Chair, I also wanted to just further clarify what Bennett's efforts are here. There was an image that he shared with me recently that I want to share my screen on, which helps, I believe, visualize more clearly his vision for this new cactus garden. Are you looking now at the screen with the image of the cactus garden?
Yes.
Okay, so this is one that Bennett provided to me. I said, in order for the board to kind of wrap their head around this somewhat major change in the landscape, I think we really need something that kind of illustrates it in a three-dimensional manner. And that's what Bennett's provided here. And I think it gives you, it certainly gives me more comfort in understanding what the vision is here. And I think it's reasonable. I think the Bennetts will, the Howells will enjoy it immensely. And as I said earlier, I think that if there were to be future owners who wanted to do a more literal restoration, they could return that area back to its original condition.
I just wanted to also, if I could add to that, Ken, is you could see in that mock-up that we have very soft, and these are all desert plantings, all native desert species that take very low water usage, but will give you some color throughout that garden. So the perimeters of that garden are supposed to be softening the edges of some of the more rectilinear portions that the cactus will take on. That and some of that, so as a combination of some formality with a more natural design around the perimeters, because there's formality that exists from the tiled fountain out to the pool that lines up with the pool house. So there's some very direct indications that Tilly Lewis had started. And then I think she took the lead from the original owners of George Hiho and how he placed that tiled fountain off the center of the loggia, and then where the stairwell from the upstairs comes down to meet the fountain in the center of that. So I'm carrying this path that runs through down to the guest bedrooms for access and have a real interesting interaction in this garden that whoever's visiting can enjoy. And I think it's very unique. And again, you'll see there's no grass in this garden. So I think we're helping satisfy the water use requirements here.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. So board, are there any other comments or questions or, yes, okay, Member Hanson.
Thank you. I just have a couple questions of clarification, and thank you to the Howells and the project team. It's, can tell you're putting a huge amount of thought into this and really wanting to do the right thing. And I think it's going to be a beautiful asset and a real example of restoration of a city landmark. I just had a question for Ken, actually, regarding the landscape revisions. On your table, there was one that said pending. Did that image we just saw of the cactus garden, was that what you were? So do you feel like you have enough on that now? Okay, so then that would be a yes?
Yes.
Okay, so there would be nothing. And then I wasn't sure from Mr. Howell regarding the loggia. Were you asking actually that some type of glazing be allowed to remain? I know that the recommendation of staff was to actually remove that and have it be an open veranda.
Is it Commissioner Hanson?
Yes,
If
or board member Hanson, sorry.
Board member Hanson, there's actually a physical rendering of what I was envisioning.
Right.
The subsequent back panel, it replicates what was historically there, the steel sash glass, for lack of a better word, French door. I mean, because that's kind of how I look at it. It's obviously Spanish and inspiration, but there's a steel door that was the exterior door. It just can no longer function as there you go.
Right.
So in that, thank you so much, Ken. What we were envisioning is taking and having a multi-paned steel sash expanse, because it is, what is there now is simply, it's awful. All right. I just, it may have been beautiful at the time it was built, but it does not reflect history, the past, or anything. And I think that the idea, there you go, none of those panes would move. They would be completely static, but they would also be able to allow us to keep the security screens, which not only protects security issues, but it also protects us. And I haven't lived through these yet, but I hear that you guys have sandstorms. And I hear that when the rain comes, it's been like the rain that we've had for a month in Georgia. I mean, we need to find a way to bottle it and send it out there to you guys, because we've had so much rain. I mean, it's just crazy, just ridiculous amounts pouring down rain here in Georgia. But those monsoon rains that come, it provides a level of protection that I think is helpful to the house and to our family across the board. So we would bring the exterior, no glazing, get rid of that thought, but think of it as bringing forward of the French doors that were there to a complete area, but it would allow us to maintain the security screens that are there now, and then maintain that as an air-conditioned space for, for life. Because we do have a lot of outdoor space. What the house really misses is conditioned space, both heated and cooled. So that's really what we're looking at. So it wouldn't stay with this horrible look. We would do something different. And then honestly, if you guys choose not to go that way, I'll salute and move on. I really was serious. Both my wife and I, at the same moment, after kind of like swallowing hard, did fall in love with at first sight with this house, and then candidly with Palm Springs. And we're ready to get building, and I'm ready to get out there. I'll have you all over for a cocktail.
Hey.
A fundraiser, all right? No, seriously, that's what we're envisioning, because we don't need a door that opens. We need something that's secured. And then to back it up, if I don't maintain that security wall there, there's no way I can keep the old doors in place. They will have to be pried out and new doors brought in that are secured. And I just don't think that's the right answer for this house. Robin, do you have any comments on that?
No, I mean, hello. I'm probably a big piece. I am definitely the big piece of wanting the loggia. I do like the added security. I don't care for the way it looks now. It's an eyesore, frankly, but I really do like having that kind of barrier on the back. I think if that is all removed and goes back to an outdoor space, the existing doors we have, which are beautiful and we want to keep, that line the main room, aren't really adequate as exterior doors in the way that they lock, in the way that they can be opened. I mean, they just aren't very secure. I look at myself as spending, time out there, both with Hilton, but also by myself, with my daughters coming to visit. There's times where I would, just want to be in the house and just like knowing that I can kind of secure the front and the back of the main house, particularly given some of the kind of crazy, just very, the break-ins we've had this summer and some of the things we've been through while the house, even though it was alarmed and has cameras, people managed to get around that. So we are, it's really a security issue for me. And also I just want the look. I want the back of it to look beautiful and better and in keeping with what is there. And I think having the steel and sash and glass panes that kind of mimic what we have on all of the other exterior doors would kind of tie into that whole look, but yet give us just the security back there. So it's just, that's definitely a comfort level for me that I've really pushed with Hilton and with our architect, John. So I,
And board member Hanson, I mean, we'll do whatever you guys tell us to do, all right? But that would be the only addition that we would make to Ken Lyon's proposal to you, because I think he has been extremely thoughtful in the way he has presented this. And while I mentioned when I began, both Rob and I have had a pretty extensive experience in restoring old homes. He also gets it, because when you do it, you got to do it right the first time. You know, I mean, you can't take an old home and leave old plumbing or leave old electrical that could burn the house down. Or, I mean, you've got to go through and do these dramatic things. And I wasn't expecting to have to put a new roof on, I'll tell you. But I think my wife pointed out what we were asking for. Just that one small caveat to Ken Lyon's very thoughtful recommendation to this board.
Okay. Can I just follow up maybe with one question, maybe comment? I don't know, for Ken actually, because I'm feeling like, you know, this is a little bit different because when they bought it, it had already been altered and altered not in a great way. And it's not always, you know, when people buy something with that existing condition, they not always be required to restore something back to an actual original condition, but they're still doing something to improve the appearance of it. And I personally understand, you know, the need for, you know, like you said, safety and periods of time where you're not there. Certainly the heat to make it actually usable more than, you know, months a year. So I don't know, I guess maybe what I'm suggesting is perhaps staff could continue maybe on this one issue to work with the applicant and the architect and maybe see if there is something that works for everybody and lets the Howells accomplish what they need for that space. I don't think it necessarily needs to come back to us. I personally would trust that decision. So that's just a thought for me, but certainly, you know, we'd love to hear from the other board members in that regard.
Sure, and I would agree with you, Member Hanson. So I won't reinforce that, but Mr. Lyon, your response.
Well, I appreciate this whole presentation from start to finish. It kind of blows me away. I'm looking at this also, as Member Hanson said, you know, when I look at this as the city's historic preservation officer and we're taking on a major project like this, the goal is to follow the Secretary of the Interior standards, and where you have the ability to do so, to bring something back to its original condition. However, what's being proposed here is not unreasonable. The way that John and Bennett have worked on this detail as well, where you see in the imagery that I held up on the screen just a moment ago, there's an integration. We're not just looking at these enormous panels of glass that don't reflect at all the period of the 30s, but they're looking at putting this back in a steel sash style that's very appropriate. And this is where I've come to a balanced opinion about this. And that is the same way that I look at the cactus garden. This is an opportunity for this family to really enrich and bring this house back to life. If a future owner wants to take this back to its original character, the steel sash glazing that they're proposing to put on right now can also be removed. The one question that I would ask or encourage the Howells to do in putting that glass in the way that it's proposed in John's drawing, are you able to also in some way bring back that original flagstone floor in some way, whether in new material or if the old material is still there under the marble? Would it be possible to get that, at least the floor, back to what we see in the original drawings? Because I think if that can be done, I am comfortable following through and respecting their request to allow that glass to go back in the way that it's shown in John's drawings.
I'll swing the first sledgehammer.
We certainly don't want to keep what's there. It is a, like
Yeah,
I'm comfortable.
a
with this
marble
approach.
laminate, I think, or something.
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm okay with this approach, and for the same reason I just made the argument, is this can be replaced and this can be removed if a future owner wishes to do so, and I'm not uncomfortable with the manner in which John has designed this alternative replacement glass.
okay, other board comments? Any other board comments? Vice Chair Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two sets of questions, for one for the architect and one for the landscape designer, along with some comments. So considering everything that's been said, I'll try to tailor the comments and be as succinct as possible. And these are questions I had written down long before the meeting, so I just have to ask to have them answered to my curiosity. The first would be for the architect, Mr. Walsh. Can you tell us, it wasn't stated in the plan, even though it looks like wood, can you tell us what the final material for the new trellises will be? And the second question for you is, was there any discussion, or obviously there was a discussion with the owners about why the spa placement was done between the pool and the pool house, so on the north end of the pool rather than the south end of the pool, because it changes the relationship of the pool to the pool house, and that expanse of lawn that is part of that second landscape, which has been identified by a very esteemed landscape historian as being a period of significance, whether or not everyone agrees with that. So those are my two questions for the architect, and then I will wait until the landscaper is able to talk to me about those questions. So the material for the trellis, and then the issue of the spa placement.
Member Nelson, to answer your question regarding the material for trellis use, you'll see some of the spans are pretty lengthy. So there's going to be some structural loading and some structural capacity that you know, I'm only going to get out of steel. In those cases where I end up mixing steel with wood in a trellis, but you want a full wood appearance, there are ways that I have been able to wrap the members. So basically it's a wood veneer of a 3/4 inch, whatever. And it works. And bevel the corners and all. I have to kind of look at it a little more thoroughly and see how much steel is in that. So the jury's out. I need to kind of consult my structural engineer, do some loading and see what we've got there. But basically it would, my goal would be to have a cohesive exterior appearance, that it looks like wood, and it's the spacing of the members, the sizing of the members will connote that this is, you know, it's a wood trellis.
Great, and that wood veneer would be similar color as to woodwork that's found throughout the exterior of the house.
Oh yeah, and it is kind of interesting that the rest of the house, it is pretty cohesive in terms of the stain. You know, back in the day, it was like Olympic 914. That was it. Everybody used it. And so I'm sure that it's, you know, that would be the lead that we follow, because you find it on door trim, door sash, the windows, it's ubiquitous throughout the site there. So yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
and then the spa placement, what reason why the spa was placed at the north end rather than the south end?
Well, we tried it in both directions, and we felt since the pool house was right there, it was more accessible, as well as then with the outdoor family room and opening that up. We wanted it to be more centrally located to for its use. And the other element was the new equipment location will be on the northwest corner of the pool house. So in proximity, it's closer, so the equipment doesn't have to work quite as hard. And those were the main reasons.
Got it. Well,
Vice
that's
Chairman,
good, Bennett.
Vice Chairman
These are
Nelson.
my questions on the landscape. First of all, I wanted to applaud you all for saving 50% of the currently existing trees at the site, but also for removing those 50% that are water guzzlers or dead or whatever. So that's to be commended. But I noticed that there are two types of juniper being specified. One of which looks like a Italian cypress. And that is one of my favorite landscape features from the second landscape that was done by Charlie Lewis. And, you know, I was born here, I grew up here, and I've been driving by that house for 45 years. And there've always been Italian cypress there, so I don't know it any other way. And I see that you've incorporated some in the plan. There were some in that rendering that was just shown on the screen of the cactus garden, and they look lovely there. And I'm just wondering where the other junipers, AKA cypress, will be located.
Yeah, I use the juniper because it has the same form and look as the cypress. I don't know if you're aware, but the Italian cypress here in the desert are struggling, not just at this property, but throughout the valley. They're very prone to red spider, and it's been a horrendous nuisance right now. Thus, the juniper, it's called the green arrow, is going to take the form that I think is characteristic for that period. The other areas, there's on the north side of the pool house, we're going to develop a little garden within there. And since this particular plant is very vertical and narrower and smaller, it doesn't get as large as the Italian cypress. I've carried that into that garden as well. So it's mostly around the cactus garden again, as part of the softening and the perimeter planting in place of those old cypress that we want to remove, and then in that north pool house garden.
Wonderful, that makes sense, thank you. And then lastly for Bennett, actually two more things. It's not clear on either John's plans or your rendering that we received in a mailed packet. There's going to be bougainvillea on the trellis, it looks like, at the top, but it doesn't show where they're planted. It doesn't show where they are in the ground. Are they coming up on the inside of the trellis or the outside? Or I know these are little things, but they're important.
Vice Chairman Nelson, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I can't let Bennett answer this question. So when I was a very, very young boy, one of the bucket lists of my life was to have a home that could grow bougainvillea and palm trees. And so I feel quite certain that Bennett placed those bougainvilleas there to humor me, all right? I'm not sure exactly where he's gonna plant them, but we're gonna have a bougainvillea out there. It's a thing, all right?
I've tried to convince Hilton, you know, that they are messy and over that trellis, it might be a nuisance, but you know, and if we do plant them on the trellis, there's a planter on the outside perimeter where you'll see the columns or the posts. So they would come up the columns, and again, I don't like to cover the whole thing. You know, we might have one or two because bougainvillea go a long way, and it doesn't take much to do its job. And then plus we want to still let some light in through the trellis into that space.
Right, and another reason I brought that up is because the way that John described the material for the trellis being a steel beam or steel members, then being wrapped in a 3/4 inch wood veneer, you know that when the bougainvillea grows and starts twisting and turning over all those members, that it's going to be or could be very destructive. So I'm sure you've all thought of that, but it's just another thing to bring up. I personally have never heard of steel members or pieces wrapped with wood veneer. And I would think with all of that intense Western exposure all year long, that veneer could very easily warp or crack or whatever. But I'm not the expert when it comes to that particular type of thing. Lastly, for Bennett, I was a little surprised in the latest rendering we saw online that the cacti in the cacti garden is being arranged in a very rectilinear fashion. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, yes. And and again, after many months of studying the on-site conditions there at Invernada, I want to reinforce some of the symmetry that's happening. As I mentioned, the pool is centered on the existing tiled fountain. And then how the pool is also in the other direction centered on the pool house. So there's some, and then you have your row of Washingtonia foliifera palms just on the east side of the pool that run down that side of the property. So you're getting some very strong symmetrical lines happening. And that's where I wanted to kind of accentuate. And you can see that's why I didn't do the whole garden in a formal setting. That's why the perimeter around it is going to be soft plantings with shrubs and desert material. Everything will be drought tolerant and low water use though. And then, you know, I brought to Ken's attention also, there was a notation that, you know, this is something you see at the old Annenberg estate too. And this was a reference I use in terms of some structure. So it's a combination of some structure with soft, you know, and that's how I saw this property and the different periods of ownership.
Great, thank you. And then finally, my comments and observations about some of these things. I have read Stephen Keelong's landscape assessment, both the old one and the new one, over and over again, and I think they're very well written. And the thing I keep coming back to is how that fountain feels like it's closer to the ground than it was originally. Like he's showing that it was sticking up higher and that there was a solid band underneath the tile. So I've been looking and looking and looking at all of these photos, right? So on page 15 and page 17 of the landscape assessment, you see the original photos of the veranda. And if you look really closely, there appears to be what looks like a lip of the floor of the veranda sticking up maybe 8 inches above the lawn.
Right.
So it appears that the veranda was designed so that when you would come to the end of it, it was hard stop. And you were not meant to go off that edge. You were meant to go down to the left, down the stairs, and then go out into the garden through that little informal garden by the bedroom wing. So that would explain to me why the fountain is different now, because there was maybe some infill over the last 60 years. So I think that, you know, that explains that element of it. And having been in other houses from the period like the de Brabant house, the de Brabant house is very close by, about a block or so away, just north of the Cary Grant house. And it is a Class 1 historic site. It's a Spanish colonial revival, and it has a covered veranda that has not been enclosed. And it is a huge contributor to the feeling and the setting and the integrity of that home. Those types of covered verandas are for all of the early Spanish homes here in Palm Springs. And I've known of people who have removed enclosures, much to their delight. They're like, oh, I love this open outdoor space that I can sit in and be shaded and be protected from the wind. And that one is designed so well because it has the house coming out on the north side, which is shielding it from any wind or anything that would come in from the north. So having said that and looking at those old photos and having been to the house many, many times over the years, I am very cognizant of the owner's concerns about security. We've experienced them here in our own neighborhood in Twin Palms. And it's a real problem all over the city. However, you there at Invernada have this huge added advantage of being an island unto yourself and having this huge perimeter wall all around the site. Not to mention the incredible landscape plan that will plant very heavily on the western and northern side. Not to mention, you know, you'll be doing everything basically from the ground up So this will enable you to do new security and put in all the right kind of cameras and everything that you will be doing along with this restoration. No doubt you'll have a security firm that will patrol, do drive-by. Most people that have an estate of this magnitude have that. So I don't doubt you would do that. So with all of those things being said, it's very difficult for me, especially with such a golden opportunity here, to go against the staff recommendation. And I do agree with staff that if possible, that veranda or loggia be opened back up to the way it was originally. And very cognizant of all of your concerns, but that's just a personal thing. And so that pretty much concludes everything I have to say, but I do want to applaud everyone involved. I've lived here a long time. I know all of these people. I know Bennett. I'm aware of Robert Van Tassel. You have picked all the right people for this project, and that is really impressive. So that's it.
Thank you. I think so too.
Thank you, Vice Chair, for all of those very meaningful comments. Okay, are there any other comments, questions, suggestions? Member Miller? Yes.
I just want to briefly applaud the Howells for taking on this project. It's a wonderful testament to your appreciation for historic architecture. And I wish you great luck in bringing this to fruition. I'm sorry that I was not able to make the board's site visit at the time they did it. But I do look forward to seeing this project move forward, and I'm excited to see the work progress. Regarding the loggia, I will say briefly, I heard both sides of the story. I appreciate Ken's willingness to accept the practical reality of security concerns of the homeowners. And so I would support the enclosure of the loggia with the understanding that in the future it could be removed and that it's not visible to the exterior of the property. Thank you.
Thank you. Other board comments at this time? Any other board comments? Okay. So, well, I was just thinking about like being in Spain, and they're those old ancient arches and loggias and verandas, but then they are protected with that a contemporary enclosure as you have described. And I kind of look at it, the modern living, with the old, and I know I've seen them, they work together. The fact that you want to live there and it's not a museum is very significant and important. So I support the enclosure and appreciate Mr. Lyons' willingness to make that work. So any other comments before I call for a motion? Any other comments? Okay, so seeing no further questions, may I please have a motion? Okay, Member Hanson, your motion is?
I just have a question for staff on the motion. Do we address at all the allowance of or further communication regarding the loggia and our support that it can be enclosed? Anyway, let me take a shot at it and then you can tell me. Okay, so I move to approve the certificate of appropriateness with conditions for the Class 1 historic site located at 657 North Via Mira Este.
And my question would be, do you want to make that motion amending the staff recommendation to allow enclosure of the loggia as
Yes.
shown on the design drawings?
And also amending the staff recommendation that the loggia be open to allow an enclosure.
Mhm.
Subject to
Okay.
continuing work with staff.
Okay, so I have a motion, and may I have a second?
Second.
Okay, So we have a motion made by Member Hanson, a second by Miller. Is there any further discussion on this? Is it clear what the motion is and the understanding? Okay, very good. Thank you. So now I will call for the question. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Okay, well, the motion passes 5-0. So congratulations and thanks for these very thorough reports, very thoughtful comments, and compelling sides. And it's very exciting to have this very important residence restored in our community. So we thank the Howells and their team for this wonderful project.
Well,
I'd just like to
thank
thank
you on
for all
behalf.
of your time.
Go ahead, Robin.
I was just gonna say thank you all for all of your time this evening and for all of the time you put into this, not only with Ken, but with the entire group, and how much time you spent going over these reports and reflecting on this. And it's certainly been a journey, but I think it's going to be I know it'll be worth the wait once we can get started and bring this home back up to its glory.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all. So let's proceed to agenda discussion item 5A. And a subcommittee for the 2023 Preservation Matters Symposium has been formed with 2 board members, Vice Chair Nelson and Member Hanson are those 2 members. Because of the Brown Act, we can't have more than 2. And Mr. Nelson, since you are just so talkative tonight, would you please report on your symposium planning in brief?
Sure. I'm no different than any other meeting tonight. So
We love you.
so privileged to be chairing the Preservation Matters 2023 event with Member Hanson and our advisory committee, Dick Burkett and Catherine Huff. I am pleased to say that we just settled on a theme for the upcoming symposium, and it will be 2 themes that diverge. One day we'll focus on tourism and the history of tourism in Palm Springs and surrounding areas, and the second day we'll focus on water and the history of water and the nature of water in the desert with respect to development, growth, and impending drought. So there are 2 very interesting topics. They have some overlap, and we have an impressive roster of speakers lining up and a few more coming on board. We've gotten confirmation from previous speakers like Greg Huff and Stephen Keelan. PSPF will be involved, PS Modcom will be involved pending their final confirmation. We're working on the tribe. They're waiting for us to give them dates because they are also trying to open their cultural center this spring. So ideally, we would like them to get that done before our symposium so that they can then present and then have a tour of the facility as one of our tours. And we're also going to be working with Desert Water Agency, which is very exciting to me because we're trying to get the community more involved in different neighborhood organizations. Modernism Week will be involved in some way, still to be determined. And Stephen Drucker, a wonderful presenter, has decided to come on board. And the Historical Society will be joining us, I'm sure. And Steve Treenan, who presented last year, and Charles Dubois will be presenting again as well. So it's very, very exciting. It's all coming together. We have our September meeting in about a week, Monday the 12th, at the City Hall Planning Conference Room. And I believe that Gary John from the Preservation Foundation will be joining myself, Member Hanson, Ken Lyon, Dick Burkett, and we will be consulting on the side with Catherine Huff so that we don't break our quorum rules for this particular event. Meanwhile, if anybody else like Member Miller or Member Rosner have any thoughts or suggestions or input, we are very open to those. So please let me or Janet know. And Janet, if you have anything to add, please do.
I just
Sure.
want to say all the heavy lifting that Mr. Nelson has already done on this conference. He sent out tons and tons of letters and responding to people. So far he's the hero here. I'm just kind of in the wings, but I'm learning a lot as I go along because I'm obviously not familiar with all of the players in Palm Springs preservation. Getting to know people as we move along, but I'm looking forward to giving you much more help than I have been to this point. And I'm thinking maybe, we can sort of discuss a little bit of how we're going to approach this. As you know, we had 7 board members, so there were 3 people on the committee, Chair Huff. So when we went to 5, we had to lower the number down to 2 to not have a quorum. So I'm stepping up to the plate, I promise, but really, Chair or Vice Chair Nelson has really done a ton of heavy lifting. So thank you for that. It doesn't go unrecognized.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. And I will reiterate, this is such a hugely important community event, and it has grown by leaps and bounds year after year after year. And it's truly a group team effort. Each person that's involved brings a huge amount to it, and it is crucial that everyone steps up to the plate, so to speak. Yeah. So thank you for being on board. It means so much to me, more than you know. And Ken, I believe you have something to add on that.
I just wanted to mention that we are trying to get confirmation on the date for the event of April 1st and 2nd. With Justin's departure recently, and Chris is joining us. I've already had this conversation with Chris that as soon as we can get to interim city manager Teresa Gallivan, that we will try to get this date nailed with the convention center as quickly as we can. The other thing I will also underscore that you mentioned is, although your committee has been whittled down to only 2 because of the Brown Act, that doesn't negate or eliminate the possibility for other members of the HSPB to participate in this event. So please, all of you, do realize that you're very, very welcome to participate in this event. It's a little clumsy because we have to pare it down to 2, but this is really the board's event. So if there are times when you want to bring the board together, Jade, in some way to share in the coordination of some aspect of this event, tell me. And it's always on the agenda, of course, but if you've got something that's particular that you want to bring all 5 members together to dialogue on, please let me know and we'll make sure that's on the agenda that way.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank
you, Mr. Lyon, and we'll all help. We'll all help.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ken. And I will just say, since you brought it up, one role that's so instrumental is the person who helped to coordinate the setup of the stage and the furniture. And that person has historically also done the tours. And in the past, that's been Dan Kaiser. So if someone else like Scott or Eric would like to step forward and volunteer, maybe consult with Dan about the background on coordinating tours, that's a huge thing. And because it's a free community event, the tours are a big draw, even though they do come at the end. We encourage people to attend the symposium as well as the tour. So, if anyone wants to step up and, kind of fill the role that Dan had, we would more than welcome that. So thank you.
Thank you. So our next agenda item is a presentation by Mr. Lyon, and it's called Beginnings. So turn it over to you, Mr. Lyon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to try to make this brief because I wasn't anticipating that we would have such a long meeting tonight. But let me see if I can make this go. And I wanted to kind of do this as well for the benefit of our new planning director. This is a presentation that I had prepared back in 2015 for part of the library lecture series, and I thought it was a good time to sort of begin bringing some of this information forward. My intent is to try to bring in some guest speakers to different board meetings to just further enrich this whole effort. So here we go. So the beginnings of the Palm Springs Historic Site Preservation Board. Welcome to Palm Springs. Those old buildings, why historic preservation matters. Because people crave real places with real buildings, real people, and real stories. Why does preservation matter, especially in Palm Springs? Palm Springs is like no place else. It has natural beauty, cultural history, celebrity history. It has architectural history. It has cowboy and Western history. Palm Springs has a real story to tell, and that's what's important about why we do preservation here. So how did preservation begin? Where did it all begin? Well, of course, it began at the Plaza Theater, built in 1936 by Julia Carnell, the architect of Williams, Williams & Williams. The Plaza Theater became a center point for the community in the 30s. And as you can see in this early photo, Section 14 was really pretty much undeveloped at that time. So this was a big deal to have this kind of a shopping center in Palm Springs at that time. And of course, part of the Plaza Shopping Center is the Plaza Theater. And the Plaza Theater had its opening night in, I believe, 36 with the showing of Camille. And here you see a bunch of local people coming in and stepping up to the ticket booth to get their tickets for the show. But wait, what happened? In 1978, the ticket booth at the Plaza Theater was demolished. It prompted a call to action. The Desert Sun picked it up, and Council Member Foster said, the destruction of the booth stimulated a reaction, to do something to set aside other potential historic sites before they're lost. We have very few sites like this left, and if we don't do something soon, there won't be anything left to save. So Foster suggested that the city form a committee to review the plans. And as they say, the rest is history. So a historic preservation committee was formed. The city council ordered this 1978, and they were tasked. Establish the need, determine the objectives, establish criteria, identify methods, assist in developing the preservation element in the general plan, provide methods for ensuring the implementation of council policies, complete a list of potentially historic and cultural values, create a means of designating such site through the ordinance, and by the way, get it done in 6 to 9 months. Well, they went to work, and here's where the story turns to the new kid on the block, librarian Henry Weiss. Henry was 30 years old when he came to the city of Palm Springs and took on the position of library director. And Henry was instrumental. And this particular article was written when he first joined the city. And I've spoken with Henry recently. I twisted his arm to try to get him to come to us today and actually make this presentation, but I couldn't get him to come. But it was really Henry that worked together to look at what other cities have done and work with the committee that was put together and tasked. And suddenly, after that emerged our municipal code section 8.05, which was designated and adopted by the city council in 1981. The committee's final report in May of 31st, 1979. Excuse me. This quote I thought was compelling. When we lose an important landmark, we lose more than an old building. We lose the memory of what has been. We lose our sense of the past, the most visible evidence of our heritage. So the council concurred with the findings of the committee, and the first Historic Site Preservation Board meeting was held on November 2nd, 1981. The Municipal Code 8.05, of course, is the rules of the game. And it is, of course, to reflect the cultural, social, economic, political, architectural, archaeological history, to stabilize and improve buildings, to foster civic beauty, and strengthen the local economy. And indeed, it has. Here are some of the milestones. 1981, the approval of the new ordinance. The first Class 1 building in 84. The first historic district in 86. In 88, the creation of the historic combining zone overlay. In 88, the first revision of 8.05, reducing 7 classes to 3. In 97, the City Council approved the first Mills Act contract for the Kaufman residence. In 2009, we were recognized under the Preserve America program by the President and First Lady. In 2014, Palm Springs achieved certified local government status with the State Historic Office of Historic Preservation. In 2014, we also saw revisions to the parking ordinance, giving incentives for historic structures. We also saw an update to the cutoff date for Class 3 from 1945 to 1969. Incredibly important in terms of recognition of our vast mid-century modern inventory of buildings. In 2015, the first annual Historic Preservation Symposium, which Jade mentioned earlier, later became renamed Preservation Matters. In 2015, the first presence at the Modernism Week show. In 2018, ordinance revisions that required a demolition moratorium. The first citywide survey and context statement documentation. This is available on the city's website, and it's an incredible compilation and story of the city's development. In 2019, the first comprehensive ordinance revision establishing Class 4 status as anything older than 78. In 2021, the city appointed its first historic preservation officer. Here is the evolution of the historic preservation booth at Modernism Week. We later had these banners that we've used whenever we do public presentations for the board. I will trump my own horn here a bit. I developed these for you. Of course, the one on the left is the top of the tower detail on the Oasis Hotel by Lloyd Wright. And the one on the right is, of course, the many different architectural screen walls and textures that you see on buildings here in Palm Springs. The benefits of historic preservation, you all know this, so I'm preaching to the choir, but it's tax credits. Mills Act contracts can reduce property taxes. They can also look at tax credits at the national level if the properties are also listed on the National Register. There are exemptions on parking regulations for commercial buildings, a huge incentive in the downtown area where parking is at a premium. Prestige and credentials, historic hotels, commercial buildings are recognized by historic tourism organizations. Money. As historic or heritage tourism continues to grow, historic neighborhoods, celebrity homes, historic sites are revenue generators for photo shoots, celebrity events, tours during Modernism Week and throughout the year. What is the future of historic preservation? Passing the torch. As Robert Ember said, educate, educate, educate. Foster civic beauty, economic development, tourism, branding, choice. Education, learning about the place you live makes living there more interesting. Quality and pride of place, authentic, walkable, cool. And Palm Springs is cool again, and so are its historic sites that made it cool in the first place. So I urge the Historic Preservation Board always going forward, educate and improve versus protect and prohibit. Historic preservation is a catalyst for balanced growth and positive change. Fighting the good fight and losing doesn't equal a win for historic preservation. Preservationists must talk to building owners. They must be effective educators, persuaders, statesmen, and have a backup plan. Preservationists must hear the whistle before the train arrives. Before the bulldozers show up, they got to get the application submitted for HSPB and City Council consideration. The voice of historic preservation needs to evolve from a mantra of we need to prohibit, protect, guard, and prevent to we need to problem solve, persuade, produce, and promote. And I believe we are doing that effectively every day with this board. Palm Springs started like any place else, a little dusty main street, wooden buildings, a few individuals with a strong pioneering spirit, and it became like no place else. The passion for great architecture, a sprinkling of Hollywood glamour and wealth, the blessing of a beautiful natural setting, and the relentless advocacy to preserve the history that makes us unique and one of a kind. So here are your quiz questions. Multiple choice. Like no place else or any place else. Entry sign A, entry sign B. I give you a hint. Which one is more like Palm Springs? Like no place else or any place else. Bullock's department store, 1948 demolished. It was replaced by El Mercado Plaza. It could be any place. Which says Palm Springs? Saks Fifth Avenue from 1958 or Saks Fifth Avenue that happened in the 1990s. And I would assert that's where its inspiration came from. not very Palm Springs centric. Like no place else or any place else, the Town and Country Center, 1947. And at one point when our downtown specific plan was still being chewed around with, this was what we were going to get in place of the Town and Country Center, which of course has become not only a Class 1 historic site, but I believe it's now listed on the National Register. Last quiz question. In 1923, Pearl McManus commissioned Lloyd Wright, architect and son of Frank Lloyd Wright, to design the Oasis Hotel, considered at one time to be one of the most beautiful buildings in Palm Springs. Here is its beautiful dining hall. I believe this dining hall was something like 85 feet long. In the early 50s, the property was sold and most of the Oasis Hotel was demolished to make way for the Oasis Commercial Building, which is also now a Class 1 historic site. Pearl McManus saved the adobe home built by her father, Judge John McCullum, in 1884, which is now in the Village Green on Palm Canyon. The Oasis Hotel Tower and the attached set of hotel rooms and a few of the retail spaces fronting Palm Canyon Drive were spared the wrecking ball and are now Class 1 historic site number 10. So, what happened to the beautifully designed Lloyd Wright dining room? Well, fortunately, Pearl moved that too. It still exists at the Village Green Park, which is part of it serving as a former ice cream shop. In 2018, at the recommendation of the city of the HSPB, the city council added the dining room to the Oasis Hotel landmark designation. And for anybody who had been in the former Agua Caliente Cultural Museum, which was in the part of the old dining hall, you have seen this extraordinary complex scissor truss design that Lloyd Wright created at the crossing of the dining room. It is a story to tell, just like everything else. That's why preservation matters in Palm Springs. Thank you.
Wonderful. That was so great, Ken. So is that on a website? Is that accessible, that PowerPoint, or not?
It's not accessible. I've used it in different presentations that I've given orally. It's a little hard to just throw up on the website, maybe with some additional captioning or something. I could certainly make it available through the hyperlinks on the HSPB webpage.
Well, you did that in 12 minutes.
I talked really fast.
Fabulous.
Probably all wanting to get out of here.
but for organizations, that are looking for talks about preservation, I mean, from Rotary, to the Women's Club, to library. I mean, we should present that more often.
I can take it on the road anytime.
Yeah,
I usually give it a little bit more time. I really
but you did really good. So thank you for sharing that with us. It's very meaningful and thought-provoking and compelling and exciting and entertaining.
Well, and I think the most important message that I leave you with, and those people that I presented this with, is the distinction of what makes Palm Springs like no place else. Mm-hmm. And it's through this effort of preservation that we identify that stuff and celebrate it. Mm-hmm. There was a time a while ago when Modernism Week was just in its infancy. And they came to me and they were saying, Ken, I mean, we've got people coming from Austria and we've got people coming from New Zealand and we've got people coming from France. And doesn't the city council care? And I said, no, they don't. How much money is it bringing in? How many hotel rooms? How many t-shirts? How many dinners at Spencer's? How many trips up the tram? Give us that information. Tell us the money that's coming in from this thing called Modernism Week. And they went to the city council at one of their meetings and they said, here's all the numbers and here's the dollar signs. And the city council sat up and took notice. And Modernism Week, as you know, now is one of the biggest things that are bringing cultural heritage tourism and those tourists that spend a lot of money here to Palm Springs.
Absolutely. Good. Thank you so much. So now we're going to go on to board members' comments on the agenda. So Vice Chair Nelson.
Thank you, Catherine. I'll try to keep this brief. I'm actually not going to bring up three of the things I was going to, because I can email them to Ken. But thank you for that video presentation. If you could email that to each one of us, maybe whenever it's completely finalized, that would be helpful to have. There were some dates on there that I wanted to scribble down, but it went by too quickly.
Okay.
So I think the two questions that I do want to ask about, one for staff is there were 2 or 3 items on our work plan from last year that we settled on a year ago that we did not get to for a number of reasons that are obvious to me anyway. So I was just wondering if we were going to keep on those 2 or 3 that we didn't get around to, or if we're going to have to add those to the upcoming work plan for the next season.
I have a big sigh on that, because we would have normally begun working on the work plan a month or 2 ago.
Yeah.
You know, this year has been extraordinary. You know, I was honored with the promotion to HPO, and then I got promoted to principal planner, and I've been carrying 2 jobs for the past almost year. And it's meant that I have not been able to give attention to things that need my attention on all these things that we do with respect to preservation. I have not turned in the certified local government annual report, which is due back in March, which is what makes us eligible for grant submittals. I'm hoping to find time to get that done. I had met, as I think I shared with you, with Hugh Capter regarding working on getting a nomination together for the golf course clubhouse building that he built. That's top of my list to try to pull that forward. I think it's, I would say there might even be some urgency. You know, Hugh is in his 90s now, and I'd like to see that happen while he's still with us. The normal work plan that we would have done, I've just simply had no time to put some gray matter toward it. I think because we do have a couple of things that are still on the work plan, I'd like to suggest that we carry that forward for this next year. If there's things, once we tackle those couple of 2-3 things that are still left that we want to start talking about as upcoming priorities, I think we can certainly entertain that. We also have a fairly considerable backlog of submittals and applications that have come in from private property owners in the community that I have not been able to prepare and bring forward for you. I keep kind of telling those people, yes, it's coming, but in all seriousness, there's a lot of stuff backed up right now that I'm hoping to get through. I will give you a brief update that we have gone through some interviews, and I believe the city has made an offer to somebody to replace me in the position of HPO. And I hope to have more information for you about that at the October meeting. Related to sort of things that we would normally take care of here at the September meeting or even July is the election of officers. We normally should have taken care of this in July. And I have not had time to put that together. So I will have that on your agenda for October. I think that's kind of it in terms of what you were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Any other?
Only because so many people in the community have pressed me about it, and I know that it's still moving through the channels and it's going to come back. But the airport, so the whole branding thing. Clearly, the western facade is part of a Class 1 designation, and there were some photo renderings in that packet, that city staff or city manager packet, and it clearly showed some of the western facade where you enter the airport to go to the the check-in desk and security, and it showed the brand, the proposed branding on the front of the building. So I just wanted to find out from staff, will this come back to the board at some point?
I did communicate with the individuals at the airport who put together that initiative. And I did remind them that the front of the building is a historic designated site, both again at the national and local level, and that the ordinance does require all things related to alterations to that facade must come before the HSPB, including signage. So the short answer is yes.
Thanks.
Okay, any other comments from board before we go on to staff comments? So, Mr. Lyon, any more staff comments? You've worked hard this evening and through the summer. Member Hanson.
Just before we adjourn, I had the October 4th on my calendar and this says the 11th. Is that correct?
I think the 11th is the correct date. There
Okay.
was an error under the historic preservation link, I believe, to the, what we refer to as the schedule of all the meetings.
Okay.
And historic preservation for October is October 11th.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I was going to announce that, so
Oh.
thank you. Because I did note the meeting date had been rescheduled, from our regular, to that. And so there was a note about that. So if we don't have any other further discussions.
May I just double check?
Yes.
Chris,
Uh-huh.
did you have anything you wanted to add in terms of staff member comments? You're muted.
Sorry, multiple mute buttons. Nothing for me this week, but thank you for allowing me to participate in my first meeting. Looking forward to seeing you all again soon.
So very, very good. Well, thank you everyone for participating. So seeing no further discussions, this meeting of the Historic Site Preservation Board is adjourned at 7:48 to the meeting of Tuesday, October 11th, 2022 at 5:30. And as previously noted, this is a rescheduled date from the regular that was the first Tuesday. It's now on the second for that month only. So thanks to all for participating.
Thank you, everyone.
And welcome to fall. Summer has got to be over pretty soon.
Yeah.
Almost another month or two, huh? Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.